December 1970. A small town in Arkansas that most people pass without slowing down. At 5 in the morning, a 10-year-old boy stands on the edge of a frozen road. His shoes are already wet. His fingers are numb. In his hands is a crumpled concert poster with one name on it, Johnny Cash. Little Rock is 23 miles away. In his pocket, 47 cents, a sandwich wrapped in paper, and a folded note written in his mother's handwriting. She died 3 months ago. The note says only one thing. If I can't go with you to the concert, go alone. Johnny will understand. The boy has no ride, no bus money, no backup plan. Just a promise he refuses to break. He takes his first step. The snow starts falling harder. Pause. 9 hours later, this same boy will stand trembling near a locked door behind a sold-out arena. And what happens next will force one of the toughest, most guarded musicians in America to stop his concert in front of 12,000 people, kneel down in front of a stranger's child, and change 2 lives forever. Let us know where you're watching from, and we hope you enjoy the story. The trailer sat behind a line of bare pecan trees, the kind that looked like black wire against an Arkansas sky. Inside, the heat came from a sputtering propane heater that clicked on and off like it was thinking about quitting. 10-year-old Tommy Richardson sat cross-legged on the linoleum with his mother, Eleanor, their backs against the couch. The floor vibrated faintly from the old record player, its lid taped at one corner, the needle worn enough to hiss before the first note even landed. At Folsom Prison, the sleeve said, creased at the edges from being handled too many times. When Johnny Cash's voice came through, the room seemed to tighten and settle, like a hand had closed around the noise of everything else. Tommy watched his mother's face, more than he watched the spinning vinyl. Eleanor kept one hand on her side, not squeezing, not dramatizing, just resting there as if it belonged. She smiled at the strong parts and went still at the quiet ones. She talked without looking at him, as if the story lived somewhere above the lamp, and she was reading it off the ceiling. Your Uncle Ray, 1968, after he got back, she said. He was sitting in his truck outside the mill. Said he was done. Her voice stayed steady, but her throat worked once, hard. He turned on the radio because he didn't want to hear his own head. And Cash came on. One song. That was it. What song? Tommy asked. Eleanor didn't answer right away. She reached behind the couch and pulled out a shoebox. Inside were coupons, folded letters, a spool of thread, and 2 stiff paper tickets wrapped in wax paper like something you saved from getting damp. December. Little Rock. She held them up like proof. 50 cents at a time. Every week. I didn't miss. Tommy blinked at the numbers on the tickets, the date, the row. It felt impossible that a thing that real could live in a shoebox. That night, long after the record ended, Eleanor's breathing turned shallow. She tried to stand and couldn't. The ambulance lights threw red bands across the trailer walls, slicing through the dim kitchen like a warning. In the hospital hallway, a nurse said, "Cancer," out loud. And Tommy understood it, the way you understand thunder. By the look on adults' faces, not by the word itself. A doctor told him his mother had known for months. In November, the room smelled of antiseptic and weak coffee. Eleanor's hands were lighter than he expected, bones under skin, but her grip was still certain when she took his right hand and held it. She pressed a folded note into his palm with one ticket, then closed his fingers over both, like she was sealing a deal. "Johnny sings for people like us," she whispered. Her lips were dry. She wet them and tried again. "He'll understand why you'll come alone." Tommy stared at her, trying to keep his face still so she wouldn't spend strength comforting him. "I'll go," he said. "I promise." His father, Roy, showed up late and smelled like sawdust and whiskey. After the funeral, the second ticket vanished. Tommy found the torn corner of the wax paper in the trash, and that was how he knew it wasn't an accident. On the morning of the concert, the clock in the kitchen read 5:03. The trailer was so cold, the air tasted like metal. Tommy put on his own shirt, then his father's old work jacket over it, too big in the shoulders, sleeves swallowing his hands. In his pocket, he stuffed a sandwich wrapped in paper, and the note in a cellophane bag so it wouldn't fall apart if it got wet. He opened the door without letting it squeal. The yard was white, with a thin crust of snow. When his boot hit it, it made a dry crackle, louder than it should have. He paused, listening for his father's cough, the bed springs, any sign he'd been caught. Nothing. Tommy stepped onto the road, turned toward Little Rock, and started walking. One small figure under a heavy jacket, carrying a promise like it had weight. Route 67 looked wider than it should have at dawn, a pale ribbon cutting through fields that offered no shelter. Tommy walked on the gravel shoulder because the asphalt held a sheen of ice, and every step sent a dull shock up through his ankles. He stuck his thumb out the way he'd seen grown men do, arms straight, chin up. Cars passed anyway. A pickup slowed once, then sped up. The wind slid through the gaps in his jacket and found the skin at his wrists. To keep his teeth from chattering, he sang under his breath. Not loud, just enough to hear himself. Lines he knew by heart, words that felt like they had edges you could hold on to. When the cold pressed harder, he sang faster. When it eased, he slowed down again. The road smelled like frost and diesel. His breath made clouds that broke apart as soon as they formed. A black and white cruiser pulled over just past the 5-mile mark. The tires crunched behind him. A man leaned out the window, hat low, eyes scanning Tommy's shoes, his jacket, the folded poster tucked under his arm. "Where are you headed, son?" Tommy didn't stop walking. He turned, answered quickly. "My grandma's, over by Hensley." The sheriff stepped out, boots planted wide. "That's so." Tommy nodded and held up the poster without thinking. The name printed big across it caught the morning light. The sheriff sighed, long and tired, the kind of sigh that meant he'd already decided something. "Road's not for kids," he said. "You keep off the lane, and you turn back before dark." He watched until the cruiser disappeared, then kept going, heart loud in his ears. By mid-morning the cold had found its way into his shoes. Snowmelt seeped in, turned his socks heavy. His lips cracked when he licked them. At a bend in the road, the smell of grease and coffee came first. Then the building, a low diner with fogged windows and a flickering sign. $2 lay near the door, pinned by a rock like it had been waiting. Inside, the heat hit him so hard he swayed. He ordered hot chocolate and a hamburger and wrapped his hands around the mug until feeling came back. Dory, the woman behind the counter, didn't rush him. She slid the plate closer and watched the way his fingers shook. "You headed somewhere special," she said, not a question. He nodded. He didn't explain. "I get off at 3, she said after a minute. "I can drive you some." "It's the wrong way," Tommy said. He pushed the plate back, half-finished. "But thank you." Outside again, the sky dimmed early. The last 8 miles were worse. The wind picked up and pushed snow sideways. His legs burned, then went dull. More than once he thought about sitting down. Just for a minute. Just until the shaking stopped. He took out the note then, hands clumsy, and read it again. At the bottom, In smaller letters he hadn't noticed before, a line waited. "You're stronger than you think. I know." Tommy folded it carefully, sealed it back in plastic, and put his head down. Each step hurt. He took it anyway. At noon, room 304 of the Marion Hotel smelled like burnt coffee and hotel soap. Johnny Cash sat on the edge of the bed with his boots on, elbows on his knees, staring at his hands. They wouldn't stay still. Not shaking enough for anyone to comment, just enough that he noticed. Enough that he kept his fingers laced together to hide it. 2 months clean didn't feel like a victory yet. It felt like a negotiation that could fall apart if he spoke too loudly or thought too long. The pills were gone, the bottles too, but his body still remembered. Cold sweat gathered at the base of his neck. His stomach rolled for no reason he could name. June sat across from him in a straight-backed chair, coat folded neatly on her lap. She didn't hover. She watched. The way someone watches weather roll in, alert, patient, ready. A knock. An envelope slid under the door. Johnny picked it up, heavier than it looked. Prison stationery. Folsom. He read it standing, then again sitting down. The man wrote about a night in 1968, about a radio in a cell block, and a voice that cut through the noise in his head long enough to stop him from doing something final. No praise, no drama, just facts. Johnny folded the letter carefully and put it in his pocket like it might break if handled wrong. At the auditorium later that afternoon, the sound check dragged. 12,000 empty seats stared back at him, a gray mouth waiting to be filled. The band tuned. A guitar fed back. Johnny missed a lyric he'd sung 1,000 times and waved it off, jaw tight. The manager leaned in close. "Big night. Nashville's watching. Might be a deal here." Johnny nodded without answering. The word deal landed wrong. June stepped closer, voice low. "Don't sing for them," she said. "Sing for the one person who needs it tonight. The kid in the back who doesn't know why he's here yet." Something about that stuck. He didn't say why. An hour before showtime, Johnny stood alone in the dressing room. He bowed his head, not long, not fancy, just enough to steady himself. He thought about promises, kept and broken, about his brother Jack, about how easy it was to disappear even while standing in a room full of people. A guard poked his head in. "There's a boy outside, back entrance, says he's got a ticket. Won't leave." Johnny waved a hand. "Take care of it." But the room felt tighter. He stood, walked out, told himself he just needed air. The hallway smelled like dust and warm cables. Down near the black entrance, he heard a voice, thin, stubborn, saying something about a promise. Johnny slowed. He didn't know why he kept walking. He only knew he did. The wind hit harder behind the building, funneled between concrete walls and loading doors. Tommy stood near a single bulb over the black entrance, its light turning the snow into sharp white needles. His jacket hung off him like a borrowed curtain. One shoe squeaked because it was soaked through. The other didn't make much sound at all, the sole half loose. When he shifted his weight, pain lanced up both feet, and he pressed his lips together until the sting became a dull throb. He'd tried the front doors first. The line wrapped around the corner, adults shoulder to shoulder, stamping their boots and joking like it was just another Friday night. A staff man at the rope saw Tommy's face and shook his head before Tommy even spoke. "Need a grown-up with you," he said, not unkind, just final. The boy held up the ticket anyway. The man barely looked, so Tommy went where he'd heard a stagehand mention VIP and service. He circled the building with his ticket tucked inside his fist, as if holding it tight could keep the day from falling apart. When he finally found the black door, he leaned against the brick and tried to breathe without shaking. A tall guard stepped out, broad shoulders filling the frame. His name tag read, Marcus. He didn't move like the younger men inside, full of hurry. He moved like someone who'd learned to save motion. His eyes took in Tommy's wet hair, the tremor in his hands, the dark smear of blood at the edge of his sock where the shoe had rubbed raw. "You can't be back here," Marcus said. Tommy lifted the ticket. "I have one." Marcus didn't reach for it. "You got anybody with you?" Tommy swallowed. "No, sir." "That's the problem." Tommy's voice came out rough, like he'd been breathing dust. "I have to get in. I promised." Marcus studied him a moment longer. "Promised who?" Tommy's gaze dropped to the ground. The snow was tracked with boot prints and tire marks. "My mama." Marcus's face tightened, not in anger, more like he'd heard a kind of hurt before and knew what usually followed it. "Where you come from, son?" "Pine Bluff." Marcus let out a low breath. "That's not next door." Tommy nodded once. He didn't want to say it because it sounded crazy even in his own head. But it was the truth, and truth was all he had left. "I walked." Marcus's eyebrows rose a fraction. "How far?" 23 miles. Tommy's fingers flexed around the ticket, then went numb again. "In the snow." Marcus glanced toward the door, toward the warmth and the rules posted inside. He looked back at Tommy. "Why would you do that?" Tommy fumbled in his pocket, pulled out the cellophane bag. His hands couldn't quite manage the fold at first. He tried again, slow. The paper inside was creased and softened from being read, but the writing was clear enough. Behind it, a small newspaper clipping showed a name, a date, a line that meant she wasn't coming back. Marcus read without touching it. His throat moved once. "I can't just—" Marcus began, and stopped. He rubbed his jaw, eyes restless. "They'll eat me alive if I let a kid through without—" Tommy's voice cracked, thin with exhaustion. "She said he'd understand. She said Johnny would." Marcus looked down at him, then over Tommy's shoulder as footsteps approached from the corridor. The sound wasn't rushed, but it was certain. Boots on concrete. A man who knew where he was going. Johnny Cash came into the pool of light without his guitar, coat open, face drawn in a way the posters didn't show. He stopped when he saw them. A guard holding the line, and a boy held together by sheer stubbornness. Tommy heard Marcus say, quietly, "Mr. Cash." Johnny's eyes shifted to the ticket, then to the damp paper in Tommy's hands. The boy tried to speak, and couldn't. His throat locked. He stood there shaking, staring up at the man he'd only ever seen on album covers. Johnny's voice was low, almost conversational. "What am I supposed to understand?" Tommy's mouth opened, closed. He held out the note like it was the only language he had. Johnny took it. He read fast at first, then slower, as if the last line pulled him in. His face changed, not into a smile, not into grief, but into something sober and focused. He read the sentence aloud, for Marcus as much as for the boy. "If I can't go with you, go alone," he said. Then he looked at Tommy. "She wrote that." Tommy nodded, tears finally breaking free, hot against cold skin. "She said, 'You sing for folks like us.'" Johnny's gaze didn't drift. It stayed on the boy's eyes. "Where'd you start this morning?" "Pine Bluff, sir." "In those shoes?" Tommy gave a small, helpless shrug that was almost an apology. Johnny's jaw tightened. Then he lowered himself down onto one knee, despite the stiffness that came with him everywhere now, bringing his face level with Tommy's. Close enough that Tommy could see the lines around his eyes, the tired honesty in them. You did your part, Johnny said, voice steady. Now, let me do mine. Johnny stayed where he was for a moment, the note folded once in his hand, his thumb worrying the crease. He looked at Tommy, then past him, as if something farther back in time had stepped into the corridor with them. The noise of the arena leaked through the walls in dull waves, people laughing, stamping, waiting. Somewhere above it all, a clock ticked too loudly. For a split second, another place pressed in on him, a sawmill floor in Arkansas, the scream of metal, his brother Jack on the ground, his father's face turning inward and never quite coming back. Promises made to a boy who didn't get to grow up. Promises carried like a weight for decades. 5 minutes, Johnny, the manager barked, rounding the corner red-faced. The house is full. Nashville's already seated. Johnny didn't answer. Marcus shifted his stance, uncomfortable. Boss, he said quietly, they're calling your name. Johnny stood, slow, joints protesting. He looked down at Tommy again, not as a problem, not as a delay, but as a fact that couldn't be ignored. The boy's lips were blue. His hands shook even when he tried to hide them. Johnny shrugged out of his black jacket and draped it over Tommy's shoulders. The fabric swallowed him. Marcus blinked. Sir? Take him to my dressing room, Johnny said. Get the arena doctor, now. Tommy's panic flared. No, no, sir. I have to be out there. I promised. I can stand. Johnny crouched again, close enough that the rest of the world fell away. You already kept your promise, he said, firm but gentle. You got here. That matters. Let us take care of the rest. The doctor worked fast, efficient hands cleaning and wrapping feet that had gone too far for a 10-year-old body. Tommy clenched his jaw and didn't cry. Johnny watched every movement, arms folded tight across his chest. When Tommy admitted his father didn't know where he was, the air changed. Marcus made a call. Another. The answer came back heavy with implication. A missing report filed without much urgency. A man known more for his bar stool than his worry. The manager burst in again, voice sharp. They're whistling now. This is a disaster. Johnny turned. Then let them whistle. A deal like this doesn't wait, the man snapped. Johnny's eyes went cold. Neither does a kid bleeding through his socks. The chant started in the distance, his name over and over, 12,000 voices pounding it into the walls. June appeared in the doorway, reading the room in seconds. She looked from the bandaged feet to Johnny's face, to the note still clenched in his hand. "What are you doing?" she asked. Johnny exhaled once. "What I should have done a long time ago." He looked at the manager. "Tell the audience we're starting, but clear the center seat in the front row." "That's the governor's wife," the manager said, incredulous. Johnny didn't blink. "She can sit somewhere else." He turned back to Tommy. "Can you stand?" Tommy nodded, unsure but determined. Johnny held out his hand. "Then come on." Tommy took it. They walked, not toward the audience, not toward a seat, but down a narrower corridor where the floor vibrated with bass and anticipation, toward the stage itself. Behind them, the noise swelled. Ahead, the light waited. The corridor narrowed as they moved, walls darkened by years of cables dragged and cases bumped through. Tommy could feel the sound before he saw anything. A low roar pressing against his ribs, vibrating the floor through the thin soles of his shoes. Stagehands passed them without slowing, faces set, eyes forward. Someone tuned a guitar nearby. The note hung in the air, unfinished. They stopped just short of the curtain. From here, Tommy could see the edge of the stage, a slice of polished wood glowing under white light. Beyond it was nothing but brightness and noise, an ocean he couldn't measure. His mouth went dry. His fingers tightened around Johnny's hand without him meaning to. Johnny knelt again, careful with his back, bringing himself level. The stage light cut across his face, showing every line, every hour he'd lived. "You told me you promised your mama you'd be at this concert," he said. Tommy nodded, afraid his voice wouldn't work. Johnny held his gaze. "What if you didn't just hear the music tonight?" he said quietly. "What if you stood with it?" Tommy stared, trying to understand the words. "I don't know how," he said. "I can't." "You don't have to," Johnny replied. A corner of his mouth lifted, not a showman's grin, something smaller. "Just stand next to me. Can you do that?" Before Tommy could answer, June reached them. She took Johnny by the arm, pulled him a step aside. Her voice was low but sharp. "This is reckless," she said. "There are cameras, press, people who'll twist this into something ugly." Johnny didn't look away from the stage. "He's not a stunt. He's a child. He's a promise," Johnny said. And for the first time his voice rose, cracked with something he hadn't meant to show. "And I'm done walking past those." June searched his face. Whatever she saw there made her release his arm. She nodded once and stepped back. The announcer's voice boomed. The crowd erupted. Johnny stepped forward alone, the roar hitting him like heat. He raised a hand. Slowly, the sound thinned to silence. 12,000 people leaning in without knowing why. "I met someone tonight," Johnny said into the microphone. His voice carried easily, no effort. "A boy named Tommy. He walked a long way to be here, because he promised his mama he would." A hush settled, heavy and complete. "She can't be here," Johnny continued. "So tonight, this music is for her." He turned and held out his hand. Tommy froze. The light spilled over him, unforgiving. Marcus's hand touched his back, steady. "Go on," he said. Tommy stepped out. The sound that met him wasn't noise, it was a wave. Applause broke over the room, rising, rising. Johnny guided him to center stage, kept his grip firm. "Look at me," Johnny murmured. "Not them." Johnny spoke again. "What was her favorite song?" Tommy swallowed. "I Walked the Line." Johnny nodded. He brought the guitar up, found the strings. The first chords rang out, clean and true. As he sang, Tommy felt something inside him loosen. Tears came, quiet, unstoppable. Johnny glanced down, saw them, and sang on, not louder, not softer, just present. 12,000 people breathed together. The song carried them all. The concert ended after 9, the last note still hanging in the air when Johnny finally set the guitar down. Tommy had spent the whole set just off to the side, sitting on a road case with Johnny's jacket wrapped tight around him, watching fingers move on strings, watching faces soften. When Johnny called him back during the final song and let him speak the last line into the microphone, the sound that followed wasn't applause anymore. It was something heavier. It took minutes to fade. Backstage, the air shifted again. A county sheriff waited with another officer, hats in hand, voices low but official. They explained it cleanly. A missing child report, a father found in a bar, social services alerted, procedures, timelines. Johnny listened without interrupting, jaw set. He asked for 5 minutes. They sat in the dressing room, the noise now distant, replaced by the hum of lights and the faint ticking of the same clock. Johnny leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Tom," he said, dropping the formality, "I need you to tell me the truth. Are you safe at home?" Tommy stared at the floor. "He doesn't hit me," he said finally. "He just isn't there." That was answer enough. Johnny made 2 phone calls, one to his lawyer in Nashville, one to a pastor who knew the system and the people who worked it. By 10:30, a quiet couple named David and Martha Henderson arrived. Licensed foster parents Johnny had worked with before. Papers moved fast when the right names were spoken. Roy Richardson showed up close to midnight, eyes red, breath sour, shame clinging to him harder than the alcohol. Johnny didn't raise his voice. He didn't lecture. He just said, "I lost someone once. I know what it can do to a man, but your boy is still here. Don't waste that." Roy broke then, nodded, agreed to treatment. When it was time to leave, Johnny walked Tommy out to the Hendersons' car. He pressed a small envelope into the boy's hand. "Open it later." Tommy hugged him hard. "Thank you, Mr. Cash." Johnny shook his head. "Thank you." That night, in a quiet room that wasn't his own, Tommy opened the envelope. Inside, a check, more money than he'd ever seen, a guitar pick, worn smooth, and a letter, written in a steady hand. It said that pain doesn't vanish, but it changes. That promises matter. That walking 23 miles proves more than strength. It proves heart. Years passed. Roy stayed sober. Tommy grew up. He kept the pick. In 2018, on a quiet studio set, a grown man told the story for the first time. When asked what he remembered most, he didn't say the crowd, or the song, or the stage. He knelt down, Tommy said, looked me in the eye, and told me my mama was proud. He saw me. That's what saved me. 23 miles. One promise. That was enough.